Nowadays, everybody's got a story. I'm talking to you right now because I've been asked, bribed really, to tell you the story about two gentlemen, and I use that term loosely. Two gentlemen who got what we call the X Factor, and they started a podcast. First, there's Coach Brew. He's the brains behind the operation. How smart is he? Well, what if I told you that boy's practically got more degrees than a thermometer? 12 years as a championship-level college coach taught him you can be outmanned. But if you're smart, you're never outmatched. Now Coach Brew is an author and entrepreneur. Then there's the muscle, Jon Rennie. He's there to do the heavy lifting on the podcast, and my, oh my, can that boy lift. I once saw him deadlift a greyhound. The bus, not the dog. His 4 food groups are protein powder, pre-workout, coffee, and bourbon. John was an officer on a nuclear sub during the Cold War, 800 feet underwater in a steel tube. That's where you learn leadership is a people business. Now John's an author and entrepreneur. These guys aren't even household names in their own household. But with dreams of fame and fortune, John and Jon set out on a journey, hosting a podcast called The X Factor. What the hell is the X Factor? Beats me. You'll have to listen to find out.
He's recording.
He is recording. It's recording. I'm not actually recording. It's recording. We're live. We are recording episode number 001. I only put 2 zeros in front because I don't think this thing's going to make it into the thousands. I think we're looking at hundreds before John gets us canceled.
I don't think it's going to be me.
No, I said John. I was referring to myself.
Yeah.
You're not going to get us canceled. You're an upstanding citizen. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the XFactor Podcast. I am your fearless leader, Coach Brew, and I am riding shotgun today with the real fearless leader, the muscle, the deadlifting machine who is so hopped up on pre-workout, he's rendered himself speechless. Say hello, Jon Rennie.
Hello, Jon Rennie.
There you go.
How you doing, Coach Brew? Good to be here.
Yeah, so what we're doing with episode numero uno is somebody once told me you're supposed to orient your listener and share with them like what they can expect from the podcast. So this is the episode where we orient the listener and share with them what to expect from the podcast. Riding, you can see him sitting in the car seat we have him strapped into. In his vehicle. If you're watching this podcast on YouTube, we have Parker, who is what would be the best way to describe Parker? He's our intern, and Parker needed a nickname, so I've affectionately nicknamed Parker the DFE. And that is the director of freaking, or whatever F word you want to use, everything. The DFE is Parker. So if you don't like the production quality of this, don't email me. Don't message Jon Rennie. Blame Parker.
Yeah.
If you don't like the subject matter of what we're talking about or the guest that we have booked, John, what's the listener supposed to do?
So it's always Parker's fault. Just remember that. Yeah.
It's always Parker's fault. You blame Parker for everything. The DFE does freaking everything. You don't like the lighting. So like right now, the lighting shining on John's face in the camera.
Yeah.
The right side of his head is very bright, where the left side of his face is a little darker. You almost look like the yin and yang, that the Chinese symbol, because one side's so dark and the other side's so light. That's Parker's fault.
It is
Parker,
entirely.
why don't you drive over to John's house and adjust his lighting
Someone needs to.
before the
Parker,
show?
if you could just move this shade, close this shade, that would help.
I absolutely would.
So Parker, say hello to everybody. I mean, we have literally tens of listeners right now on
Hello,
episode
everyone.
001.
My name is Parker. I guess I'm considered the director of
Everything.
effing everything.
I mean, look at your name on the Zoom screen. I even changed your name to the DFE on the Zoom screen. So it's official.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
I might as well
it's
be
like
called
our
Professor.
relationship is Facebook official now, Parker.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's complicated.
It always is with you. So, Parker, where are you? Tell everyone where you are, because you're not in the studio behind the board, adjusting sound, producing things, standing behind the camera.
So I am actually in the the parking lot of Publix because I was going to a grocery store this morning, and then I received the email and I was kind of at a loss for words because I was like, wow, I'm gonna have to jump on this on my phone and not home.
Yeah.
So
if you're in a Prius, by the way, you're fired.
no, I'm actually in a rental car because my girlfriend and I were just recently in an accident a couple days ago.
She was driving, right?
Yes, she was driving, and a
This
deer
is
actually
all part of me starting to get us canceled because I just made a sexist remark about.
Well, so she was driving and we were going down the road, and it was at night, and a deer came out from the other side of the road and literally ran straight into our car. I've never seen a deer. The deer like basically lowered its shoulder into our car.
I mean, it's 2020, right?
Yeah.
I mean, most deer are thinking, just do it, just get it over with. I'm just going to
Was
run
there a
into this
deer
car.
crossing sign right there?
No, there was no deer crossing sign.
See,
it was the
that's
biggest
just an
buck I've ever
irresponsible
seen.
deer. They're not smart. Not all of them are smart enough to know you cross at the deer crossing sign.
Exactly. I mean, this deer, its friends, what was funny is that the big deer, it was a huge buck who hit us. And then there was two smaller deer that were smart enough to wait. And then they crossed after the cars went. But
I like big bucks, and I cannot lie.
exactly.
Is there a fine for singing on this show? There should be.
Yeah. So this is part of orienting the listener. We have the ability to fine one another for doing certain things that annoys the other person. So if there's a certain word that I don't like, if Jon Rennie uses that word during the episode, $100 fine to
So
the
words
charity
like
of my
succulent.
choice.
Succulent, not allowed. I'm just finding a word.
Context.
Oh,
You know,
sorry.
if it's used like in a masculine sort of subject matter that we're discussing, yeah, succulent, probably not a good word. If you're talking about the plant,
Yeah.
probably okay. Anyway, we're allowed to fine each other. That's part of our charm. If you were driving a Prius, or do you have to plug that vehicle in that you have?
No, it is.
Right,
It's a
safe.
Nissan. It's a Nissan Rogue, I want to say.
Because I would have fined you.
Just immediately? Would it be like a $25 fine instead of the $100? Or
yeah, I mean, you're on an intern budget, so we would we'd find a way to work out a financing plan for you. So in terms of orienting the listener, this is part of the culture. We can fine one another for our behavior. You know, like kind of like in the NFL, there's conduct clause for everything. Like you're not allowed to ski in the off season, or there's a fine. You're not allowed to do certain things, or there's a fine. So there's a fine here.
And by the way, Parker, you're in charge of keeping track of who owes who.
Yep.
Because I can't.
Who owes who and who owes what?
Yeah.
All right, when I go back through the videos, I'll make sure to count all the fines. But we have none as of right now.
Yeah.
Correct?
0. Yeah, absolutely.
This is why you're in charge of it, because there are 3 things I'm really bad at math and English.
Is that product placement there, John? I see a Dunkin' Donuts coffee in your hand. I thought we were going to do no product placement.
Shout
Yeah,
out to Dunkin' Donuts this morning. Today's podcast is brought to you by no free shout outs. That's the
No
other
free
rule.
shout outs.
Yeah, as we lay the groundwork here, there are no free shout outs. And
No, seriously, if Dunkin' Donuts wants to sponsor the show, we are open for that. So Dunkin', call me and we'll get that set up.
Yeah, same thing goes for is it bearded or beard vet coffee?
Beard Vet Coffee. Yeah.
Okay, so Beard Vet Coffee, when you decide to sponsor the show, I'll decide to pronounce your brand name correctly. Okay,
I'm sure
Bearded Vet Coffee. Same thing with Top Gun Coffee, the coffee
Bottom
that
Gun.
sponsors your other
Bottom
podcast.
Gun
Yeah,
Coffee
so when
sponsors
Bottom,
Yep.
when Bottomed Out Gun Coffee decides to sponsor this podcast, I'll learn to give correct attribution to their brand name.
And just as we're talking about sponsors in particular, we are looking for a bourbon sponsor, and not necessarily for the
100%.
money, but for the bourbon. So just
100%.
shout out to all of our friends at bourbon companies across Kentucky. We are
especially
open.
the Samuels family over at Maker's Mark. I'll make sure I send you a copy of this episode, and you can see just how fun and entertaining we are, and the fact that we love bourbon. And it's one of John's 4 basic food groups. What are the other 3?
Well, let's see. There's pre-workout. There's whey protein shakes, and there is black coffee and bourbon. It's 4 basic food groups. And you don't know how true that statement is.
Yeah. Like, I started as a joke, but it's funny because it's true. As you get to know John, you'll understand that.
Yeah.
So, number 1, we can find each other. Number 2, no free shout outs. Number 3, there are certain rules if you're going to be a fan of this podcast. Is it to or of? Fan of this podcast. We are looking for people to either love us or hate us. Very, very little, if nothing in between. Kind of like Howard Stern. You either love him or you hate him. Now, I'll tell you this, you need to give us a little time. We're going to grow on you. I'm like an acquired taste, I'm told. My wife told me.
Like a fungus.
I was going to say like sushi.
Like gas stations?
Day old gas station sushi.
Perfect.
like the one that you walk up to and you immediately smell, and you're kind of like, I don't know how I feel about it.
Yeah,
that's it. But I'm hungry. Yeah.
But I'm hungry. We're getting this done.
Yeah, exactly. So, there are different levels to listenership and levels of engagement. So we are looking for rabid engagement, P1s, as you will hereby be referred to as, meaning preset number 1. I spent a bunch of years in radio back when people listened to the radio in their car, and they had pushed the button for the preset. This is back when radios had buttons, Parker. You can ask your grandparents about that. They pushed preset number 1. It was always your favorite station was P1 on the dial or on the preset. So we're looking for P1 listeners. John, what exactly would be the behavior and habits of a P1 listener or super fan of our podcast?
Well, first of all, they're going to subscribe to the show, and they're going to tell all their friends about the show.
So Lieutenant Rennie just gave you your marching orders, folks. So number 1, subscribe
on your favorite podcast, right?
And on YouTube.
So subscribe, do that right now. Number
Wherever
2,
podcasts are sold for free. Yes.
Number 2 is you want to tell all your friends, right? So you want to tell your friends about what we're doing here.
You're assuming our listeners have friends. You're holding them to a high standard. That they have friends.
Yeah.
I know
I'm going out on a limb here.
Well, I think our listeners are very successful, popular people, A-list A-listers, if you will.
Right.
So they're going to have a lot of friends. So yes, tell all your friends.
And the third thing you want to do is you want to support those that are supporting us. So if we do eventually have bourbon sponsors, you want to buy that bourbon and drink it a lot, often.
No, when we have a bourbon sponsor.
Did I say if? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, when we have a bourbon sponsor, I want you to make sure that you buy their bourbon, drink their bourbon, and use our code, whatever that's going to be. Probably going to be XFactor or X
Or
and
Factor.
Factor. Yeah. Or DFE maybe.
I think that'll
be like for
best.
our underwear sponsor. Promo code Parker.
So we go ahead.
So what else would a P1 listener do, John?
They're probably
How
going
would they
to
tell? They told all their friends. Let's say.
Right.
Let's be hypothetical here. They told all their friends. How would they tell complete strangers? And people who, let's say, maybe pretend to be their friends by air quotes, following them.
Yeah, so they could tell about this new podcast they just heard about called the XFactor Podcast, and I don't really know what it's about yet, but it's
about the X Factor.
Right, which we haven't really defined yet.
Well, I'll define it for you right now. You want me to define it for you right now?
So what is the X Factor? Coach Brew, what is the X Factor?
So the X Factor is that quality that people who perform at a very, very high level and enjoy what they do possess. They possess the X Factor. Like it's just, he has that quality, and no one seems to know how to describe that quality. Except for those, like you recognize it if you have it. So like we wouldn't be calling this the X Factor if we didn't have the X Factor ourselves. And I think, the X Factor is that which it's an internal trait, part of your mindset, that which enables you to elevate and separate yourself from the herd, from the pack.
That's the big thing. Who amongst us are separating from the pack, especially when we're filled with thousands of people have podcasts, thousands of people have companies. We want to try to highlight some of those people that are just killing it, that are breaking away from the pack, and they're doing things that are unique and different and special. And they're not doing it with spending a lot of money on marketing, but they're doing things that are unique and grab people's attention. That's what we're looking for. Those are the people that have the X Factor. So maybe guys like me, a submariner, former submariner, now started his own manufacturing company, right? You got to have that. You got to have that X Factor. You can do something like that. Or how about a lacrosse coach, former lacrosse coach? Go ahead. Yeah, so you have a question? You have a question? Do you have a question?
Is it submariner or submariner?
No. See, this is very clear. So there has to be a fine if you say submariner. It's a submariner. Like you can't say like this guy's a mariner and this guy's a submariner. It kind of sounds like we're not at the same level. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you get that?
I'm educated now. I feel enlightened.
And it's a boat, not a ship.
What's the difference?
Smaller.
Technically, why is it a boat? It sinks. It sinks on purpose.
Purposely,
how is that a boat?
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering the same thing.
It is. It is a boat, not a ship.
How? Do boats have periscopes? Do all boats have periscopes?
No. Well, no. But I think it comes from the German word Unterboot. U-boat.
U-boat. Gotcha. Damn Germans.
Anybody German here? I'm not.
No.
Okay, good.
No.
Parker?
Nope.
All right, good.
Parker doesn't have a last name. Parker doesn't have a first name. He's a DFE, John. Come on now.
Okay.
I gotta fine you for that. If you're going to fine me for saying submariner,
you should get fined for that. And anyone who's listening who is a former submariner would agree with me.
Not a mariner, though. submariner.
Mm,
Why aren't they called mariners then?
doesn't make sense.
Why are they called mariners?
Doesn't make
Tomato,
sense.
tomato, potato, potato. So we were talking about how to share the podcast, John. John keeps digressing, and I'm ADD as hell. So I'm going to go off on tangents if you lure me down that tricky little path. So in terms of how to share with complete strangers, Parker, how do people share this on, say, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, wherever else that I'm not thinking of that they could share things online?
All right.
What's our
So
do we have social media handles for this?
yes, I'll put everything in the description. I'll put all the links to all of our social media websites in the description, as well as you can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Facebook is coming soon. But Instagram and Twitter, you can find us at Podcast XFactor on Instagram and Twitter. YouTube is going to be the XFactor Podcast, and then Facebook will also be the XFactor Podcast.
So you got that, folks? If you're listening to this, don't go there now, because that would mean you would stop listening. But when the show is over, go to all of those channels, follow us, and share this up. That's how you become a P1.
I was just about to say the P1 guys are going to do that right away.
Yeah.
P2s are going to take a little bit longer.
Yeah. P3s. The goal is to turn a P3 into a P2 and a P2 into a P1. So, you know, P1s are going to P1. And if you're a P1, you know you're P1. You know what to do. Share it up. Talk about it. And give us a rating and review it. Parker, if you're going to give us a rating so far, how many stars would you give us?
5
And
out
I
of
don't
5.
mean this episode. I mean your work experience so far. I'll be honest with you. I'm a pain in the ass to work for. I have high expectations of myself and those around me, and people find that frustrating.
I like it though. I was just telling my girlfriend about it, just how like it's to me
Most
it's a
guys
challenge.
talk about me to their girlfriends, and then the girlfriends start loving me. So be very careful. You're entering dangerous waters, to quote the submariner.
Exactly. But I love it. I love it so far. And it's definitely been a experience that has been put me out of my box, which is good, because personally I've been working on things that like I wouldn't usually work on. I've worked on like a different side of them. So I mean I would give it a 5 out of 5 just because it's hard work, but I love learning as much as I can, and I love being able to work with you all. So
Well, 5's right back at you there, DFE.
Absolutely.
I appreciate your initiative. So I don't want to digress too far because Rennie takes us down these rabbit holes that I can never climb out of. So you know where to follow us now. You know what this is about. This is about the X Factor. How do you get on the podcast? Let's say you think you have the X Factor. First of all, if you had the X Factor, you would know it.
Mhm.
So if you know you have the X Factor, how would you become a guest on the podcast? John, what would you say?
Well, they have to first of all reach out to us and email us, and then we would be the
don't
judge.
Don't do it in a creepy way where you like try and slide into Rennie's DMs. That just gets awkward fast. It's like going 0 to 100. Don't do that.
No, and don't try to use the word succulent in a sentence to try to get me on to look at you, to be on the show. But you want to send us an email, reach out to us. And
the XFactor Podcast at gmail.com. Again,
Yep.
that email address is the XFactor Podcast at gmail.com.
So you reach out to us, and then we'll make an assessment of whether or not. Well, actually, tell us why you think you have the X factor, and we'll make an assessment if in fact, we think that you do have the X factor, and if you do, well, then maybe we'll bring you on, and maybe we'll have you, and maybe we won't. But you've got to prove to us that you have it.
And be nice to DFE because he's the gatekeeper of all things X Factor Pod. And if you piss him off or you rub him the wrong way, first impressions made within the first 7 seconds, so you better come strong or your history. He's ruthless. And Parker, if you don't know anything about Parker, the DFE, he rules with an iron fist.
That was his nickname as a child, Iron Fist Parker.
Yeah, it was. I mean, DFE kind of came later, but people were just, they're
much
so
later,
scared
like
of me.
20 minutes ago.
Yeah, I mean, they're so scared of me that they just call me Iron Fist Parker, and then all of a sudden it was just like I'm the director of effing everything.
Yeah. So we just told you how to get on the podcast if you think you have what it takes, and we are looking for good guests. What's the best way to make sure you never get on the podcast? John, what would you say? I mean, you're the deadlifting champion of the world.
I see that now. My name has been changed to the deadlifting champion of the world, and I would say that I'm not that. Because I am 53, so with age comes a little bit of decrease in how much I can lift these days. But I do know the gentleman that set the
You'd be
female
371 in dog years, by the way, if you're 53.
Oh yeah, okay. But I do know the guy that set the women's deadlifting championship of the world, Zuby, the podcaster / rapper. He identified as a woman one day, and he deadlifted the world record for a female, and he has the female deadlifting champion of the world right now. So Zuby,
we'll
shout out
her on
to
the
Zuby.
Podcast. Yeah. No free shout outs.
No free shout. That's a fine right there.
So you're going to get fined. Okay. But because I like you, I'm going to hold up my Dunkin' Donuts cup, and those two fines balance each other out. It's still early in the process. So,
all right. Parker's taking, I see Parker taking notes too during this whole thing.
He's driving. So how do you make sure you don't get on the podcast, John? I mean, you just gave a great example, someone we might want on the pod. And you took us down a whole rabbit hole about like men identifying as women to set world deadlifting record. Like I need you stay in the lane here. Stay in the lane. How do we make sure you don't get on the podcast?
Begging, groveling, begging to be on the podcast isn't going to work.
Yeah. Bring something unique, bring something different. So like, for example, there's going to be a hall of shame on this podcast. And I do believe shame is a good motivator. People think like shaming is not politically correct, but shame can be a powerful motivator. And there will be certain people who will never be on the podcast and will automatically go into the hall of shame. One of the ways you get in the hall of shame is if you post what I call hustle porn, #hustle, #Monday motivation. Like if you post like hustle porn on social media or talk using like hustle porn isms, like you got to grind.
You got to hustle. You got to get up early. You got to work 24 hours a day. Yeah.
So you're guaranteed to at least be on probation if you do that and not ever get on the podcast. Second way, you'll definitely never get on the podcast is if you quote Gary V. Yeah, if you think like if Gary V is your mentor, you're never coming on this podcast. And
I would add Simon Sinek as well. If you think that Simon Sinek is the God's gift to leadership, then you're not going to be on the podcast. Exactly. Or you'll have a hard time to get on the podcast because I believe if you write about leadership, you ought to actually have led somebody in your life.
And if you're going to give parenting advice to parents, it'd probably help Simon, if you were actually married and has spouse and children.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the guy that knows 1,000 different ways to pick up women, and sells a course on that, but never actually goes on a date
Yeah.
or has any sex. So yeah, like if you're quoting Simon Sinek or Gary V, you're never coming on the podcast. You'll probably be put in the Hall of Shame. And yeah, so that's also a great example of like, don't listen to us. Unsubscribe. If you're a Simon Sinek or Gary V fan, or you're into hustle porn, if you think hashtag Monday motivation ever motivated anybody, or like a poster on a wall motivates you because you see a inspirational poster of a runner crossing the finish line with a sunset in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah, like crossing like the
Yeah.
tape
Just do it.
breaking.
Just do it, John. Just
Yeah.
do it.
If you're so feeble-minded that a poster motivates you, but then that wears off in 10 minutes and you didn't look at another quote, you're probably not ever going to be a P1.
Yeah. Well, let me add one thing too. If you are a life coach and you are 21 years old, you are not going to be on the show because you haven't lived your life yet. So
You would actually have to get a life and have lived a life to coach lives. Novel thought today.
It is a novel thought today.
You mean you actually have to walk your talk?
Yeah.
Wow.
So we don't really care for fake people too much on this podcast. So if you claim to be one thing and you turns out you're not that thing, you're probably going to not only be on the Hall of Shame, but we'll probably end up talking about you a lot on this podcast. Yeah. So fake people is just doesn't win with us. You know, both Coach Brew and I have been doing it for a long time. We've been in the trenches for years. And so we don't really put up for people who, claim they're something that they really aren't. So that's why we're kind of against guys like Simon Sinek who preach all this great stuff. Never really done it. So if you've never made payroll,
air quotes.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Note to everyone listening: leaders have been eating last.
Yeah. Since the beginning of time.
Centuries.
Yeah.
Since the beginning of time, however many centuries ago that was. I told you there are three things I'm not good at: math and English. So I don't know how many centuries ago the beginning of time was. Jon Rennie probably knows. But yeah. So that's how to make sure you don't get on the podcast, how to get on the podcast, how to become a P1, and some of the different idiosyncrasies of our podcast.
What did you call me? You just called me an idiot. What?
Idiosyncrasies. Synchronicity. That's the two of us. Our synergy on the pod is idiot synchronicity. So, and it's brilliant. So there you have it. I want to wrap this episode up with what's in Rennie's blender. And blender could be a blender bottle. It could just be whatever you happen to be drinking at the moment, because your four basic food groups are black coffee, bourbon, pre-workout, and protein powder.
That's it.
Usually whey protein, John.
Yeah, so whey isolate, so it has less carbs, so it's mostly just protein, and I mix that with water, so real easy stuff. But I'll tell you what I tried yesterday. My son had it in the cabinet of supplements. It's called the Edge of Insanity. That was the pre-workout I used, and
that's a fine, I think.
Well, it's it is a fine, absolutely. Yeah. But you asked me what was in my blender. So it is this flavor is called Rick Delhog's succulent eggnog. And so that's what I had.
Rick Delhog?
He's apparently a weightlifter that uses the Edge of Insanity. So there's my many finds there. There's the word succulent used in a sentence. Then I shouted out a company, and but that was in the blender as of yesterday. This morning, I don't know what I'll have. So,
okay. So there you have it, folks. That is episode 1 in the can. If you want to reach out to us, it's XFactor Podcast at gmail.com is our email. DFE, what's the social media handle for all our channels?
The handle will be Podcast X Factor on Instagram and Twitter, the XFactor Podcast on YouTube, and the XFactor Podcast on Facebook. That will
There
be
you have
all
it.
the
And
handles.
there it is. There you have it. And
is.
there it is. This has been podcast numero uno. Jon Rennie, deadlifting champion of the world, or at least your world. Take us out of here.
All right. That's
Final
it.
words of wisdom.
That's it for the XFactor podcast. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share and tell your friends.
I think you click right there on
And
YouTube.
you
or
can
is it
click right there on YouTube. I don't know where it is on YouTube. So
Awesome.
have a great day.